are we doing today? Happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. We have a phenomenal guest today. Her name is Alyssa. She's a therapist, psychotherapist. Her Instagram handle is Alyssa Marie Wellness. Her page is remarkable. So much good information if you're really looking to invest and get clarity with mental health, therapy. A lot of people, let me see if I can try to get her on. There she is. Yay. And I'm just girl crushing on her. So we're going to talk a lot about relationship dynamics, figuring out self. Hi, Alyssa. How are you?
Hi, Erin. I'm good. How are you?
I have so much with you that I deep dove your Instagram, Alyssa Marie Wellness. I highly recommend checking out her work. You're rooted in wellness. You're rooted in therapy. Mm-hmm. Your Instagram is such a gift to people who are, struggling. Look, the past 2 years have been not easy. 2.5, 3 years. And, I see you really helping a lot of people who are struggling. And I don't think it's a bad thing to say you're struggling. For me, with you, as a therapist, what is your mission? What are you trying to accomplish?
I think for me, it's to help people realize that there's a life worth living. It's for me to help people gain their confidence back, for people to feel happy, to experience joy, to develop healthy relationships with themselves and others. I think sometimes we, get stuck in these patterns and these cycles that are not good for us. We've normalized them. So for me, it's to help people get out of patterns and cycles that aren't serving them.
Yeah. And we're, even the political landscape, we're so far apart on using those tools of empathy where I feel like I love my job because it offers such a platform to be able to listen to people. And we're not listening. We're really struggling finding ways to connect with people that might be different. And I think creating a safe space, which is what you do, to foster this open dialogue, to allow for healing. And you have so many, your work on your Instagram is so fascinating. I just want to kind of get right into some of the things that you talk about that I think you share. So let me see here. Let's start with this. First of all, how do you know when someone has emotional trauma?
So emotional trauma can stem from earlier experiences like neglect, abuse, things that cause PTSD, war, violence. And signs and symptoms of emotional trauma can be hypervigilance. So you're hyper aware of your surroundings, the people around you. You struggle with trust. You struggle with vulnerability. You struggle with communication. You might have these anger outbursts, or you veer towards the whole entire spectrum, which is you completely shut down and it takes forever for you to come back. Nightmares, frequent nightmares. There are a lot of symptoms of it. Loss of appetite, poor sleep. It really depends on the person, what they went through, but just a decrease in your functioning can be a sign of emotional trauma.
Where does it start when I think it started for me, my therapy journey, when the pandemic hit. And I'm I guess I have a lot of time. Might as well actually take some time to work with a therapist. And then that was the opportunity I had. But what if people don't realize, I think we're on this hamster wheel of going, my parents are put on a pedestal and they know the right thing. So where does it start when you become free from the shackles of your parents or whomever at the time you looked up to? And knowing that maybe they didn't always know the right thing. Where does it start when you start to question those norms?
I think for some people, when they start to question those norms is when they start to see that there is impairment or problems in their present day adult relationships. And then they start to question, where did I learn to communicate this way? Where did I learn to be maybe so quick to react? And then that's where they kind of can go back and do the deep work. Oh, this is how my parents responded. And I'm learning this is not working for me in this new relationship, in this new friendship. So they're seeing that some of the things that they learned aren't working.
What are you concerned about with the onset now that we're sort of coming out of the pandemic, like what are you
Yeah.
seeing as a therapist with your clients that are the presenting issues of what we experience? Because, you know, a lot of anxiety, depression,
Mm-hmm.
obviously there was a lot of isolation for some people. What are you seeing um, that now you're becoming aware of with what we kind of need to work through as we all experience this sort of scary time in our period lives?
Yeah, so this really depends on the person, but you mentioned anxiety. So a lot of people have developed kind of this like onset social anxiety when now they're going back into the workplace or they're going back into social settings. They almost don't know what to do with themselves. They almost don't know how to integrate back. And, you know, maybe they were extroverted before and now they just don't feel like they have that in them anymore. For other people, there was really a collective trauma that was experienced, whether it was loss of job, loss of income, loss of home. And so as people are integrating and it's almost like back to normal, it isn't normal for a lot of people because of the systemic traumas that have occurred due to the pandemic.
How do you fix it?
Oh, God.
Where do we start?
I think listening to each other, helping each other, sharing resources with one another. I know it's like such a bigger issue, but I think listening to each other is probably a good start.
Um, on your Instagram, Alyssa Marie Wellness, which I am obsessed with now, you have grounding statements for people with anxiety. And I think that that's a great place to fit in here because as a self-diagnosed person who has anxiety or feels moments of anxiousness, what are some practices? And you talk about it again on your Instagram. That's so great. What are grounding statements and what are some that may be effective?
Sure. So I want to highlight for, you know, people who are tuning in, anxiety is so influential. It has this way of making you feel like something bad is going to happen, especially when there's no evidence, right? It's just like this feeling. And then we misinterpret the feeling as, okay, this is a feeling. This feeling must mean X, Y, and Z, right? And so we want to talk back to those negative thoughts that are attached to these feelings. And we want to be able to say things to it like, I am safe. These feelings aren't predictors of the future. It's a feeling. I'm going to listen to it, but I don't have to believe the stories that it's telling me. I am safe. I am okay. And then sometimes I guide people in this. Let's say the worst case scenario did happen. Let's say that feeling was real, or not real, but it was right, and something bad is going to happen. Then we go to, I trust in my ability to navigate what comes my way. I trust in my ability to pivot. I'm going to be okay. So
yeah, and I think
really, yeah, go ahead.
Well, and I think it helps for me navigating past moments where I felt unsafe, you know, and how did I get through those feelings? And then that sort of starts to go, oh, okay, there's some resiliency there or abilities to be able to go, okay, that moment where I felt unsafe, I navigated and I'm here today. I'm just kind of like strengthening that muscle.
I like that. That's exactly what I was thinking. We want to remember the times that we've already done this.
Yeah.
We build that. We need to internalize our own resiliency because we forget. Anxiety makes us forget that we've been through this before and we've been fine or we got through it. So we want to remember it. Even if we need to write it down, put it in the notes in our phone and go back to it and be like, okay, I've done this before. I'm going to be okay.
One of the things I love asking my girlfriends is, what was the best part of your day and what was the worst part of your day? And, you know, instead of asking always the question, how are you? Because I've had really a challenging couple of years, lost my dad and my brother in the span of a year. So I'm sure a lot of people collectively are dealing with loss. But it's interesting because I love the friendships that allow for me to become reflective together and go, what was the good part of your day? And then do you remember the actual part that wasn't good and what made it not great? And like, let's talk about it, you know? So, yeah.
You know, a question I ask my friends, because I like that too. I ask them like, instead of how are you, I say like, how's your heart? You know, how's your heart?
Yeah.
You know, kind of get into like that soul connection. Like, how's your spirit doing?
You know, it's so funny. Sometimes, Alyssa, I don't even like when people go, how are you doing? Because I'm like, hello, Captain Obvious.
Yeah.
in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm not doing great, you know, and so sometimes that question becomes, you know, it's just a question and I'm interpreting it. And I'm like, how can I, like, so for instance, when my dad was sick, my dad died from lymphoma. And every day, lovingly, people would ask me, how's your dad doing? How's your dad doing? And it was a really hard question for me to answer because it was actually a question I really didn't want to even talk about. So what I ended up doing was just sending out like emails. And so now knowing when people have family that are going through something health related and they're not doing great, I don't even ask. I almost just go like, hey, how can I support you? Can I bring you something?
I like that.
Instead of just going like, how's the situation? Because if the situation feels chaotic, they don't want to sit in the chaos. They want to feel some type of homeostasis. And that's not easy to do when you're in this crisis mode.
And you can imagine, as you've been there, how many times a day they're getting that same question. It's exhausting. It's exhausting.
And it's just personal accountability. It's knowing in this moment, how do I feel? I'm not feeling great. And I know my friends are only being loving. So I'm not mad at them. But I'm also not going to shame myself or feel bad if I'm not getting back to people. I'm like, don't feel like talking about it, but I still love you.
And your friends will understand. Your friends understand.
No, and they and that has been the beautiful awakening as a self diagnosed people pleaser, which was a question that I had for you. As a self-diagnosed people pleaser, where does self-abandonment start, Alyssa? And then how do we fix that? Because I think there's a lot of, especially females, feel the need to people please. And like, even when I host a dinner party, I'm recognizing that I care so much about other people's experience. And I'm like, I got to get away from that. Like, everybody's entitled to their own experience. They're adults. I don't have to micromanage people.
I'm not responsible.
Right.
I mean, you're responsible to a degree to cook and, you know, provide, but you're not responsible for each person's individual approval of the experience. And, you know, your question was, where does it come from? And this really does depend on the individual. So I'm going to give a generic answer. And as always, there's nuance and context. But I do a lot of inner child work. And sometimes for the child that grew up in a home where love was conditional based on your performance, then maybe as an adult, you tend to grow up believing that you had to prove yourself in order to be chosen or approved by others. So it can stem from, you know, a childhood that was really based on receiving praise, if you were on what you can give. And then, you know, we have like societal constructs too, right? Just like gender roles and norms that dictate women are supposed to be a certain way. And so we've internalized a lot of these messages and felt like we have to prove ourselves. We have to audition. We have to perform. But a lot of it, we really don't.
Yeah. And I think that's great advice for parents now. I was reading a great book that a girlfriend gave me called The Courage to Be Disliked. And it actually talks about, it's a good book. And it talks about how praising creates more invalidation than it does support of being able to do the thing. Meaning, when you're constantly like, good job, like you would a dog or a puppy, that child is then conditioned to think, I'm doing this thing for approval and not for my own self. And I you know, I was raised like that too. I was an athlete growing up and I was in every sport you could imagine. And so I felt great about myself if I scored a goal or I did the thing. And then I was really hard on myself if I didn't think I measured up enough. And I've noticed that hindered me. So I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. I don't have kids. But what I thought was a good parenting technique was like praise and encourage the thing might actually have considered more of a perpetuating this notion of I actually can't do the thing. And the only reason I'm doing the thing good is because you've identified it at being good, not because I've identified it as that. Yeah.
And so we're chasing it, right? We're chasing that praise.
Forever. We're looking at it from our bosses. We're looking at it from our partner, from our friends, instead of within. and
Mm-hmm.
my service, or maybe your service, is not good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, no, I can hear you.
Okay.
I've heard you fine. Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay, good. Sorry, I don't know if I'm frozen or maybe you're frozen. This is such a great conversation, and I'm so honored that I get to have time with you. Uh-oh, you're frozen again. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll get her back. I hope this is a very interesting conversation for you guys. I hear you. I see some of you have asked questions. Feel free to ask questions if anything resonates with you. We have Alyssa Marie Wellness. She is a psychotherapist. Oh, we just lost her. She's going to jump on again. Let's see if we can get her. But it's so interesting. Like, this whole conversation is very fascinating to me. Because for those of you, if you at home, are looking to find more moments of accountability or, work in mental health. Oh, I think we might have gotten her back on. Let's see. There we go. Okay. Sorry, internet sometimes is choppy. Another question, if we can try to get her on. Okay, perfect.
Sorry, guys. I'm back.
At least we can do this. Like, that to me is what's awesome about it, is that we have the ability to, like, get you on. We were talking about personal accountability, and a couple of things that I think when it comes to personal accountability, people don't like to talk about are two feelings that we do not like to admit when we've had them: jealousy and shame. And I feel like people don't like to admit that they have it because it lowers us on the social status hierarchy, because we're afraid it'll make us look weak or make us look vulnerable. How can we start to feel more comfortable in understanding when these feelings come up and utilize them as an opportunity instead of a weakness?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we want to embrace all feelings that come through our doorsteps, like whether it's a positive emotion or an emotion that feels really uncomfortable, and use it as opportunities to learn more about ourselves. If we can see, jealousy gets a bad rap, but jealousy really can be representative of grief, something that we wish we had, right? So if this jealousy was representative of grief, if, something I like to ask clients when they're experiencing jealousy is, if this jealousy could talk, what would it say? So you want to lean in to the uncomfortable feeling instead of away from it. We want to try to neutralize the feeling by not making it so scary, not making it like so bad, because it's a feeling. It's a feeling, it's there, and that's okay. And then with shame, it's the same thing. If the shame could talk, what would it say? Let's give it words. Let's connect with it. Let's talk to it. And shame often is, a sign that we feel like we are bad. There's something wrong with us. So it's just really unpacking it. What do we think is wrong with us? And is this something that's accurate, or is this something that I'm telling myself?
Yeah. It could be a story. It could be an old story that, like, jealousy. Sometimes I'll use it as like, wait, this is telling me what I want. And how can I utilize ways in which they can empower me rather than disempower me? And then even talk about it, admit it, talk about it. Then you get to hopefully remove it from your shame storm that we often think, like, no one else is feeling this way, or no one else is going through this. I know I'm running out of time with you, but I did want to ask you, what are these 6 red flags? Because you often talk about you talk about, like, relationship to self, inner child work, which is where I think we should maybe start. But then I also think a lot of your messaging is targeted in relationships. What relationships serve you, what relationships don't serve you, and being empowered and knowing you have the choice to decide that. So I love this 6 red flags you shouldn't ignore. It's on your personal Instagram, and if you don't mind, what are they?
God, I don't remember this specific post because I write so much.
Okay. You have so many. Yeah. Okay, well, what are some red flags?
Yeah, so it's chronic dishonesty. It's, any kind of lack of safety. So whether it's verbal abuse, physical abuse, those are very clear red flags. Additional red flags in relationships are when they're dismissive of your feelings. right? And they don't want to hear you out. They don't want to engage in perspective taking. There's a lack of equality. So that's a big red flag. They don't treat you like an equal. They're very condescending towards you. So off the top of my head, those are some red flags in relationships that we don't want to ignore. Breadcrumbing is big. If they're breadcrumbing you, early on in the relationship, you don't deserve the minimum. Breadcrumbing is less than the minimum too. So those are some very clear red flags you don't want to ignore in relationships.
And I think, again, it all goes back to the child wounding in that you don't even know what breadcrumbing is because maybe that was what you were given as a child and you're still trying to seek approval. So you're willing to accept and allow a mistreatment because you don't even know what abundant treatment looks like.
Because it feels normal. It feels normal. But just because it's normal doesn't mean it's healthy.
Yeah, and people don't know what healthy looks like because they're living. Someone's asking what breadcrumbing is. Thank you. And by the way, feel free to ask. I know I'm short on time with you. I wanted to ask you one more quick question. But yes, I guess someone wants to know a little bit more of an elaborate breadcrumbing terminology.
Yeah, so breadcrumbing is when somebody sends out, like we're talking about a romantic relationship. So it's like flirtatious texts or messages. They just kind of give you pieces and that's it. Once they give you the piece, you don't hear from them for a while or they don't follow through. So they just give you a little bit to keep you there without the intention of really doing anything with it.
Yeah. Could ghost you. Come
and then come back. Yeah.
Come in and out, be present, be, dismissive.
It's good. Just like that low minimum effort to keep a person around.
Yeah. Last but certainly not least, what do you do for self-care? That's always a question I like to kind of end interviews with as someone who shows up for probably so many other people in your life. How do you prioritize, Alyssa?
I have a routine that makes me feel good. So I wake up in the morning, I go exercise, I write in my journal, and I make sure I'm big on support systems. So I make sure I stay connected to my friends. I make sure that I carve out time for them and that joy and that play and that laughter.
Oop, got frozen there a little bit. I love the play and the laughter. I'm so deep in therapy that I literally had to tell my therapists because I have like 2 or 3. They all do different things. There's EMDR and then there's like talk therapy and all. And I had to just take a quick vacation. I said, I'm going to just take a couple month break and invite a little bit more joy and silliness. And then we'll come back and reevaluate. So I think, like you said, creating balance and having the ability to remember it's like life is supposed to be fun.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. How can people learn more about what you do, Alyssa? Thank you so much. You're so fascinating. I love your work with child wounding. I love your work with relationship, but definitely with self, because I think in order for us to have better relationships with people in the outside world, we really need to have a better relationship with our own selves. And if we're constantly projecting or thinking we're the victim, that's just like a miserable prison of self.
It is. And there's so much more to life. Like life can be enjoyable.
Yeah. How can people learn more about you and work with you in the event people are looking for that?
Yeah, sure. So I own a group practice in California. And if you're in California and you're interested in finding a therapist, you can just click the link in my bio, alyssamariewellness.com, and schedule a consultation from there.
You're fascinating. Your Instagram's amazing. Check her out, Alyssa Marie Wellness. Thank you for the work that you do. You're so transparent, and I think it's hoping to raise the collective vibe of everybody right now who's maybe struggling a little bit.
Yeah. So. Thank you, Erin. Thank you for having me.
You're amazing. Thank you so much, Alyssa. All right. Bye.
Bye.